The birthday party was already in full swing when Ryan Calloway noticed the little girl sitting alone in the corner of the garden. Pink balloons drifted above white linen tables. Servers moved through the crowd with silver trays. The children of Chicago's wealthiest families ran across the manicured lawn in their Sunday clothes, laughing and shouting, filling the warm June air with the kind of noise that belongs only to the very young and the very lucky. It was, by every visible measure, the perfect party. And yet the girl at the edge of it all sat with her knees pulled to her chest, watching a butterfly land on a hydrangea bush, her hands folded quietly in her lap. She did not look sad, exactly. She looked accustomed to being somewhere that was not quite hers. Ryan had been hired to fix a faulty circuit panel in the east wing of the Mercer estate. He was done. He had signed the work order, packed his tools, and was cutting across the garden to reach the side gate when he saw her. He stopped walking. Something about the way she held herself still and patient, like a child who had learned early not to ask for too much, made him set his toolbox down. He sat on the grass beside her, cross-legged, the way he used to sit with Sophie on the living room floor. The girl looked at him, not alarmed, just watchful. Ryan raised his hands and signed, slowly and clearly. Butterflies? Or rainbows? The girl's face changed completely. She sat up straight, her eyes wide and bright, and she signed back without hesitation. Butterflies. Because they choose. Ryan smiled. He had not smiled like that in a long time. 40 feet away, through the floor-to-ceiling glass doors of the main house, Clare Mercer stood holding a glass of champagne. She had been watching her daughter for the last 10 minutes, the way she always watched her at these parties, with the particular helplessness of a woman who could solve almost any problem in the world, except the one that mattered most. She saw the man sit down in the grass. She saw her daughter's face open like a window thrown wide on the first warm day of spring. The champagne glass slipped from her hand and landed on the marble floor, and Clare did not move to pick it up. It was not anger that rooted her to the spot. It was something far more complicated than anger. It was the first time in 7 years that she had watched her daughter truly smile at a stranger, and she could not explain, even to herself, why that felt like grief and grace at the same time. If you believe that the right pair of hands can heal what money never could, please like this video, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel right now. This story is only just beginning. Ryan Calloway had learned American Sign Language the same way he had learned everything else in his marriage, by watching his wife and trying to keep up. Sarah had been signing since she was 19, trained at Gallaudet, and working as an ASL educator by the time she was 23. When their daughter Sophie was born, she began signing to her from the first week, weaving language into every bath and feeding and bedtime story. Ryan, who had grown up in a small Indiana town where the only foreign language anyone learned was Spanish, and even then, reluctantly, sat across the kitchen table and copied his wife's hands, the way a man might copy a painting he did not fully understand, but knew instinctively was beautiful. He learned slowly, imperfectly, joyfully. By the time Sophie was 2, the 3 of them had a private world built entirely of moving hands, and it was the best thing Ryan had ever been part of. Sarah died 4 years later on a Tuesday morning in February. A delivery truck ran a red light on Michigan Avenue, and that was that. Sophie was 6. Ryan was 34. The funeral was small and the winter was long, and afterward Ryan sat in their apartment for 3 weeks without being entirely sure what he was supposed to do next. What he did, eventually, was keep signing. Not because he had to. Sophie's hearing was perfect, and she could speak as fluently as any child her age. But every time Ryan raised his hands to tell her dinner was ready or ask if she'd had a good day at school, he felt something of Sarah still present in the room. ASL was the only language the 3 of them had shared equally. He was not ready to stop speaking it. He was not sure he ever would be. He took whatever electrical work he could find, residential repairs, small commercial jobs, the occasional estate call from the North Shore neighborhoods where the houses were large and the circuit panels were old. It was not glamorous work, and the income moved in unpredictable waves, But Ryan was good at it, and it kept him busy, and he was home every evening to make dinner and sign Sophie her bedtime story, which was all he had decided to ask of life for the time being. Clare Mercer had also lost something on an ordinary Tuesday, though in her case it was a Thursday in October, 3 years ago, when David collapsed in his home office at 6:45 in the morning and did not get up again. He was 42 years old. The stroke was massive and without warning, and by the time the paramedics arrived, there was nothing left to do. David had built Mercer Digital from a 3-person startup into a $200 million enterprise software company. He had also been in the middle of learning ASL. Lily had been diagnosed as profoundly deaf at 8 months old, and David, characteristically, had treated the news as a logistical problem to be solved with appropriate resources and sufficient effort. He bought every book. He hired a tutor. He practiced at the dinner table with his daughter and laughed at his own mistakes. Clare had intended to learn alongside him, but there was always one more call to take, one more quarterly report to review, one more thing that felt more urgent than it was. After David died, she tried once to open his ASL workbook. She got as far as the first page before she had to close it and put it away in the bottom of his desk drawer, because his handwriting was in the margins small, careful corrections, a note to himself about the difference between the signs for mother and father, and she was not able to look at it. She hired a full-time interpreter for Lily instead. It was efficient. It was thorough. It was, she understood on some level she had not yet fully examined, a way of ensuring that she would never have to learn something that David had been in the middle of learning when he died. Clare threw herself into the company with the focused desperation of someone who needed the noise of work to drown out everything quieter and more painful. She was, by any external measure, succeeding. Mercer Digital had grown another 30% in the 2 years since David's death. The board was largely satisfied. The press wrote admiringly about her resilience. What the press did not know was that Marco Reyes, her CFO, had been meeting privately with 3 of the 7 board members for the past 4 months. Marco was careful, strategic, and patient. He had begun by raising questions about leadership continuity. He had progressed to suggestions that Clare's focus had been fragmented by personal circumstances. He had not yet said Lily's name directly, but the implication was always there, hovering just beneath the surface of every conversation like something submerged that had not yet decided to rise. Clare came out of the house, still moving fast, still holding the posture she had worn for 3 years like a second skin, shoulders straight, expression composed, the unmistakable body language of a woman who does not stop for problems. She solves them. She crossed the lawn to where Ryan was sitting in the grass with her daughter. Lily saw her coming, and something in her expression shifted, just slightly, not fear, but a kind of careful watchfulness that Clare recognized and hated recognizing because she knew it was a response to her own habitual intensity. She looked at the man on the ground. He was somewhere in his late 30s, she guessed, with the kind of unhurried calm that could mean either great patience or great damage. His hands were still raised in a sign she didn't recognize. "What are you doing?" she said. Ryan looked up. He didn't stand immediately, which surprised her. "Talking," he said. "Your daughter asked me what my favorite kind of cloud was. We've been discussing cumulus versus cirrus. She makes a strong argument for cirrus." Clare looked at Lily, who was watching this exchange with bright, careful eyes. "She's 7 years old. This is a private party. I don't know who you are." "Ryan Calloway," he said, and now he did stand, unhurriedly. "I was doing electrical work in your east wing this morning. I was cutting through to the side gate." He paused. She was sitting by herself. I didn't think she should have to do that on her birthday. Something moved through Clare's face that was not quite what she intended to show. She recovered quickly. "I appreciate the thought," she said, and her tone made it clear that she did not. "I don't need strangers making decisions about my daughter's experience at her own party." Ryan nodded. He didn't argue, didn't apologize. He reached down for his toolbox and then Lily grabbed his arm. She signed with her free hand, urgent and clear. The words, if they could be called words, landed on Clare like something physical. She had seen Lily sign to her interpreter 1,000 times. She had never seen Lily reach out and physically hold on to someone to make them stay. Ryan looked at Lily gently. He stayed where he was for another moment, then signed back slowly, so Clare could almost follow it, even without knowing the language. It was very good to meet you. You are the best cloud expert I have ever met. Lily's face did something complicated, happy, and trying not to show it. She released his arm. Ryan picked up his toolbox. He looked at Clare once, an even look, neither warm nor cold. "Happy birthday to her," he said. Then he turned and walked toward the gate. Clare stood in the garden in the June sunlight with her daughter, who had gone back to watching the butterfly on the hydrangea, and she found that for once she had absolutely nothing to say. She stood there for a long time. The next morning, Clare sat at her desk in the home office with her laptop open and her coffee going cold beside it. She had told herself she was reviewing the quarterly projections. She had been looking at the same line item for 11 minutes when she closed the spreadsheet and typed Ryan Calloway Electrician Chicago into the search bar. The results were not what she expected. The first thing that came up was not a business listing. It was a memorial page, maintained by the Chicago ASL Education Collective, for Sarah Calloway, educator, advocate, and one of the most gifted American Sign Language teachers the city had produced in a generation. There was a photograph, a woman with dark hair and an open, laughing face, surrounded by a classroom of children, all of their hands moving. The article described her methodology, her warmth, her particular gift for teaching young children the language from the inside out, as though it were something they were always meant to know. Clare read to the end. Then she read a detail she had almost passed over. From 2014 to 2016, Sarah Calloway had served as the primary ASL instructor at the Northside Children's Communication Center. Clare sat back in her chair. Lily had attended the Northside Children's Communication Center from the age of 18 months to 3 years old. It was where she had learned her first signs. It was where, in a photograph Clare kept on her phone, a 2-year-old Lily was laughing in the arms of a woman whose face Clare had never thought to look at too closely. She pulled up the photo now. She enlarged it. She looked at the woman holding her daughter, the dark hair, the laughing face. Sarah Calloway had held Lily before Clare knew her name. Clare sat with that for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and called the electrical company. She asked them to send Ryan Calloway back to the estate. There was, she said, some finishing work that had not been completed to her satisfaction. Her voice was perfectly steady. She was an excellent liar when she needed to be. Ryan arrived at 11 the next morning. He was not alone. His daughter Sophie was with him. School was out for a teacher workday. He explained briefly when he arrived, and he hoped that wasn't a problem. Clare said it wasn't, because she was already watching Sophie sign something to her father with the casual fluency of someone who has spoken a language since before she knew there were other languages to speak. She had arranged to be in the garden when they came through. She watched Ryan work. He was replacing a weathered exterior outlet near the garden wall, something Clare had quietly added to the work order that morning, and she watched Sophie, who had settled herself on the garden wall with a book and was signing along with the words she was reading, her hands moving without a pause. Lily came outside around noon. She stopped when she saw Sophie. Sophie saw her and immediately signed, "Hello, I'm Sophie. What's your name?" Lily signed back, "Lily. Do you know many signs?" Sophie's response was too fast for Clare to follow. Lily's face broke open in the wide, astonished joy of a child who has just discovered there is someone in her world who speaks her language natively, without effort or apology. Clare watched the two girls move to the far end of the garden together, hands flying between them, and she felt something shift in her chest, a sensation she could not immediately name, somewhere between relief and shame. Ryan was packing his tools when she approached him. "Your wife taught at the Northside Center," Clare said. She had not planned to open with that, but it was what came out. Ryan was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "Lily was there until she was 3. I think Sarah may have taught her." He looked at her then, steadily. "I know," he said. "I recognized Lily's name when you told me yesterday. Sarah talked about her. She said she was one of the most communicative children she'd ever taught. She said the right person just had to meet her where she was." Claire looked at the 2 girls at the far end of the garden. She thought about everything she had missed, everything she had outsourced. Every evening she had sat at the dinner table while an interpreter translated her daughter's words into sound, and she had nodded and smiled and felt the distance between them like something she had agreed to and could not find her way back from. She turned to Ryan and said, carefully, "I'd like to hire you to give Lily ASL lessons." Ryan looked at her without expression. "I'm not a teacher. Your daughter signs as fluently as any educator I've seen. You clearly." "I'm not a teacher," he said again. "Not rude, final. And I'm not going to be someone's purchased answer to a problem they've had for years." He said it quietly and without heat, and that was almost worse than if he had been angry about it. He called to Sophie, picked up his toolbox, and left. Claire stood in the garden for a long time. Then she went inside and sat down to a dinner she barely tasted, watching Lily sign across the table to the interpreter, a kind, professional woman named Janet, who was very good at her job and who was not, and could never be, Lily's mother. At one point, Lily signed something to Janet and Janet translated it aloud. "She wants to know if you're okay. She says you look tired." Claire looked at her daughter across the table. Lily was watching her with attentive, patient eyes. The same eyes she had worn in the garden the day before, eyes that had learned, early, not to ask for too much. Claire opened her mouth. Nothing came out, because she did not know how to say "I'm sorry" in a language her daughter could understand. At 8:15 that evening, Ryan answered his door to find Claire Mercer standing on his front step. She was not wearing the composed expression she had arrived in at the estate every other time he had seen her. She was wearing the face of someone who had been driving around for 45 minutes, trying to decide whether to stop. "I'm not here as a client," she said. Ryan waited. "I'm here as a mother." She paused. "I can't answer my daughter when she asks if I'm okay. I can't ask her how her day was. I can't say goodnight to her in a language she understands without an interpreter sitting between us. And I've been telling myself for 3 years that I was too busy, and too essential, and too—" She stopped, started again. "I don't want to hire you. I want to learn. I want you to teach me, not for her, I mean for her, but also because I should have learned years ago and I didn't, and I need someone to teach me who isn't going to let me off the hook." She said this last part looking directly at him, and he understood what she meant by it. She had been let off the hook her entire life by people who needed something from her. Ryan was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped back from the door. "Tuesday and Thursday evenings," he said. 7 o'clock, we'll start with the alphabet." The first 3 lessons were, by Claire's own private assessment, humbling in a way that nothing in her professional life had ever been. Ryan sat across from her at his kitchen table and taught with the same unruffled patience he seemed to bring to everything, demonstrating each handshape slowly, correcting her without making her feel corrected, occasionally calling across the room to Sophie to demonstrate when his own explanation wasn't landing. He was a good teacher, which did not surprise her, because she was beginning to understand that competence was simply his baseline in everything he did. Claire was not a natural. Her hands, which could type 120 words per minute and conduct a boardroom with the precision of a symphony conductor, could not seem to hold the correct curve for the letter C without her pinky drifting, could not produce the sign for happy without looking like she was brushing something unpleasant off her chest. She was frustrated with herself in a way she was not accustomed to feeling, because she was accustomed to being good at things, and the experience of being genuinely, wholly bad at something in front of another person was new and uncomfortable. What she had not anticipated was Lily. On the 3rd lesson, Lily came downstairs and sat beside her mother without being asked. From that point forward, she was simply present, correcting Claire's hand shapes with gentle, matter-of-fact adjustments, the way a child might correct a parent's pronunciation of a word in a language the child has always known. The dynamic had never existed between them before. Lily knowing something Claire needed to learn. Lily being the authority. Lily being needed not for her patience, or her cuteness, or her capacity to make Claire's heart ache, but for her competence. Lily sat a little straighter on the 4th lesson, and the 5th, and the 6th. On the 7th lesson, Claire attempted the phrase, "I love you." She had been practicing it all week, alone in her bathroom mirror, and she thought she had it. She produced it for Ryan and Lily, steady and deliberate. She had the shapes wrong in 2 different places. She knew at the moment she saw Ryan's face, not laughing. Nothing like laughing, just gently and immediately present with whatever she was feeling. Before he could say anything, Lily reached across and took her mother's hands. She moved them. She adjusted each finger with a precision and a tenderness that Claire was not prepared for, and when the shape was correct, Lily held her mother's hands for 1 more second before letting go. Claire looked at her daughter. Lily signed it back to her, slowly, "I love you." And then Claire Mercer, who had not cried in front of another person since the morning of David's funeral, put her face in her hands and wept. Ryan got up and went to the kitchen window. He stood there looking out at the dark street, giving her the privacy of his turned back until she was ready. When the lesson was over and Lily had gone upstairs, Claire asked, very quietly, "Who did you learn for?" Ryan was stacking chairs against the table. He was quiet for long enough that she thought he might not answer. "My wife," he said. "I learned because she was learning, and I wanted to be in the same world she was in. And after she was gone, I kept going because it felt like the only thing I could do that she would still recognize me for." He said it simply, without performance. Claire nodded. She picked up her bag and she drove home, and for the first time in 3 years, she sat in the parking garage of her building for 10 minutes before going up, just sitting in the dark with the engine off, thinking about a man who had kept a language alive because it was the only door back to someone he loved. The photograph appeared on a Tuesday morning. It ran in a business gossip column with the headline, "Mercer CEO's mystery frequent visitor is the corner office getting crowded." The image showed Ryan's truck in the Mercer driveway, and in the background, blurred but recognizable, Ryan and Claire talking on the front steps. The caption speculated, with the particular brand of implication that stops just short of accusation, that Claire appeared distracted by personal matters at a sensitive time for the company. Claire read it twice. She set her phone face down on her desk, breathed for a moment, and then turned it back over and read it a 3rd time, because she had learned a long time ago that the most dangerous thing you could do with a threat was to look away from it before you understood exactly what it was. By 10 o'clock, Claire had 3 messages from board members. By 11, Marco had requested an emergency session. She called Marco into her office that afternoon and closed the door. "You leaked it," she said. Marco arranged his expression into something resembling concern. "Claire, I think you're under." "I'm not asking a question," she said. "I'm telling you what I know. Don't waste my time denying it." Marco shifted tactics smoothly. He had been doing this long enough to know when to abandon a position. "The board is concerned," he said. "The optics of a regular, undisclosed personal relationship with a service contractor at a time when we're in acquisition talks. There is no personal relationship. He's been teaching me sign language." Marco let a small silence fall, calculated to suggest he found this explanation either implausible or worse, irrelevant. "Claire, your daughter's situation is, I understand, it's complicated. But the perception that your attention is elsewhere." "My daughter's name is Lily," Claire said. "She is 7 years old. She is deaf, and the perception you're describing is a manufactured one, which makes it perjury if you've put it in writing to any board member, and breach of fiduciary duty if you've acted on it, which I intend to establish." Marco left. Claire sat alone in her office for a moment, and then she picked up the phone and called Ryan. He answered on the second ring. She kept it brief, because she did not know how to be anything other than efficient when she was frightened. She told him about the article. She told him about Marco. She told him she was sorry if this had made things complicated for him. There was a pause on the line. Then Ryan said, "Are you okay?" It was such a simple question. It was the same question Lily had signed across the dinner table 2 weeks ago. She did not know why it landed so hard both times. "I'll handle it," she said, which was not an answer. She hung up. Ryan sat in his truck in the parking lot of a hardware store and looked at his phone. Sophie was at school. The afternoon was bright and ordinary around him. He thought about calling back. He thought about a lot of things he was not ready to think about clearly. Then he started the truck and drove home, and that evening he sat on the couch and looked at the photograph of Sarah on the mantelpiece and asked her, silently, what he was doing. The photograph did not answer. But it also did not tell him to stop. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning. On Wednesday night, Claire sat at David's old desk in his study. She never used it, but sometimes she sat there when the house felt too large and too quiet, going through a filing cabinet of documents she needed for the meeting. The envelope was at the back of the bottom drawer, behind a folder of early company contracts. It was sealed, and on the front, in David's handwriting, were 3 lines. For Claire, open when you've forgotten why you're fighting. She turned it over in her hands. She did not know when he had put it there. She did not know how he had known she would forget, or that she would find it precisely when she had. She opened it. The letter was 2 pages, handwritten, and David's voice came off the paper so clearly and so immediately that she had to stop reading twice to breathe. He wrote about Lily. He wrote about the way Lily would laugh when she was trying very hard not to, the way she pressed her lips together and her shoulders shook. He wrote about watching Lily sign to Sarah KHOA at the Northside Center once, when Lily was barely 2, and how Lily had said something in sign that made Sarah throw her head back and laugh, and how he had stood in the doorway thinking, "She's going to be fine. She's already fine. We just have to meet her where she is." And then, near the bottom of the second page, David had written, "You're going to want to close yourself off. You're going to throw yourself into the company and call it love. I know you. It isn't. The company is what you do. Lily is who you are. And Claire, you deserve to be loved again. Don't be afraid of someone who reaches toward you. Don't be afraid of hands that know how to say things without words." Claire read the last paragraph 3 times. Then she folded the letter and put it in the inside pocket of her jacket, against her chest, and she went to bed. She slept better than she had in months. In the morning she got dressed, did her daughter's hair, signed, "Good morning, and I'll see you tonight, and I love you all correctly," all without an interpreter, and drove to the office. She walked into the boardroom at 9 o'clock, carrying David's letter in her pocket like a compass. Marco had prepared extensively. He opened with the financial concerns, legitimate ones, genuine ones, the kind that any board was right to raise, and then moved smoothly into the softer territory. The insinuations, the impressions. He pulled up the photograph. He mentioned, with carefully calibrated regret, the question of whether Claire's bandwidth had been affected by personal circumstances. He had a slide, which Claire found darkly impressive in its audacity, titled Leadership Continuity and Focus. And then he played a video clip. It was from the birthday party. Someone had been there with a phone, and Claire realized with a cold, clear calm that it had been planned well in advance. The clip showed Ryan sitting in the grass with Lily, their hands moving between them. Marco said nothing for a moment, letting the room absorb it. Then he said, "This is the individual who has had repeated access to the CEO's private residence and her minor child, and whose presence has generated press coverage that—" "Stop," Claire said. She stood up. She reached into her bag and put her laptop on the table and connected it to the room's display. She pulled up the same video clip. She let it play from the beginning. "Look at my daughter's face," she said. The room was quiet. That is the first time I have seen her smile at a stranger since her father died. The man in this video sat down next to a 7-year-old child who was alone at her own birthday party because no one else there knew how to talk to her. He talked to her. That is the entire situation. She paused, and then he taught me to do the same. For the past 6 weeks, he has sat at his kitchen table and taught me to speak my daughter's language, so that I do not have to look at my child across a dinner table and not know how to answer when she asks me if I'm okay. Her voice did not break. She did not let it. That is the personal matter that Mr. Reyes believes constitutes a leadership concern. She looked at the board members one by one. My husband built this company, she said. I have spent 3 years running it, growing it, protecting it. I have done that while raising a deaf daughter alone, while managing a grief I did not allow myself to feel because this company needed me not to. I am telling you today that I am not less focused because I learned how to say I love you to my child. I am more focused because I finally know what I'm working for. She sat down. The vote was not close. 7-0 to retain Clare as CEO. Marco was asked, quietly and with the language of mutual agreement that boards use in these circumstances, to tender his resignation by the end of the week. After the room emptied, Clare sat alone at the long table. The display still showed the paused video. Ryan in the grass, Lily's hands in motion, her face in the midst of becoming something joyful. Clare raised her own right hand. She signed the word "thank you" into the empty room, not for the board, not for the outcome, for David, who had known her well enough to leave her a letter she would need 3 years later. Ryan had not heard from Clare in 4 days when he showed up at the estate to collect a toolbox he had left in the East Wing utility closet. He had told himself several times that he was not avoiding the situation. The toolbox was simply there, and he needed it, and Thursday was a reasonable day to retrieve it. He knocked at the front door. Clare opened it, and they looked at each other for a moment, and something in his chest registered, with the quiet accuracy of instruments he had not been paying attention to, that the composed expression she usually wore was different today. Looser, more like a face. He was about to say something about the toolbox when she raised her hands and signed, "Everything is okay now." The shapes were exactly right. The rhythm was exactly right. He looked at her hands, hands that 3 weeks ago could not produce the letter C without the pinky drifting, and he felt something move through him that he had not felt in a long time. He smiled. It arrived on his face without any decision on his part, the way the genuine ones always do. The door behind Clare burst open and Lily appeared, sock-footed and skidding slightly on the marble floor, clearly having been listening for the knock. She signed to Ryan, rapid and triumphant. "This morning Mom signed to me through the whole entire breakfast." The whole breakfast, without Janet. Ryan looked at Clare. Clare was looking at a point, somewhere past his left shoulder, the way she always did when she was not quite ready to be seen, but she was smiling, and she did not seem to be trying particularly hard to stop. Ryan looked back at Lily. He signed, "Tell your mom, Sophie, says hi." Lily signed to Clare. Clare signed back to Lily, and Lily translated for Ryan. She says to tell Sophie hi back and that she should come over sometime. Ryan nodded slowly. He collected his toolbox. He was at the bottom of the front steps when he turned back. "Sophie actually wanted to know," he said carefully, measuring each word, "if Lily might want to go to the park on Sunday. They've apparently been texting about it. I don't know how they exchanged numbers. I've stopped being surprised by Sophie." Clare looked at him. The afternoon light was doing something specific to the way she was standing, and Ryan looked away from it. "Sunday works," Clare said. He nodded. He walked to his truck. He did not look back again, but as he drove down the long driveway, he turned the radio off so the cab was quiet, and he drove the whole way home in silence, thinking about nothing in particular, which was the way his mind treated the things that mattered most. 3 months later, in the second week of September, the 4 of them went to Lincoln Park on a Saturday afternoon when the light was going amber and the first leaves had just started to turn. Sophie and Lily ran ahead on the path, their hands moving continuously between them, not careful, considered signing, but the fast and fluid and overlapping language of two children who have found each other, who have built an entire shared vocabulary of jokes and references and private signals in the compressed time that children use so much more efficiently than adults. They did not look back to check on the grown-ups. They had already, in the way of children, moved past the part of the story where the adults were the most important people in it. Ryan and Claire walked behind them. The path curved along the edge of the lake, and the water was the particular deep blue it gets in September, just before the cold comes in and changes everything. They had been walking for 20 minutes without saying much. This had become comfortable somewhere along the way, the silence between them, which had started as guardedness and had gradually, without either of them formally deciding anything, become the kind of quiet that does not require filling. Claire watched Sophie teach Lily something new, a sign Ryan didn't recognize from this distance. Lily tried it, got it wrong, tried again, got it right. Sophie clapped once, sharp and celebratory. Claire signed. Slowly. "Do you think Sarah would have liked knowing you're teaching someone else?" Ryan watched his daughter for a moment. He was quiet long enough that Claire might have thought she'd overstepped, but she had learned to let him have his silences. Then he signed back. She would have said, "Took you long enough to do something useful with it." Claire laughed, a real one, the kind that surprised her face. Ryan looked at her sideways, and something in his expression was warm in a way he had stopped trying to manage. Ahead of them, Sophie had discovered a pile of leaves that had blown against the park fence, and she pulled Lily into it without any preamble, and both girls disappeared into a cascade of orange and gold, laughing in the voiceless way that laughter sometimes is when it runs too fast for sound to keep up. Ryan stopped walking. Claire stopped beside him. They stood watching the girls for a moment, two children who had each lost something before they were old enough to have a word for it, who had somehow found each other in the way that lost things sometimes do, across a garden, across a distance, through the patient medium of hands. Ryan raised his hand. He signed the word slowly, family. Claire looked at his hand. She raised her own. She signed it back, not as a declaration, not as a promise, as a beginning, the kind that does not announce itself, that arrives quietly, like the first day of a season you realize later had already started before you noticed the change. The girls came running back, covered in leaves and breathless with laughing, and the four of them stood together in the amber September light, and for a long moment none of them signed anything at all. Lily reached up and pulled a yellow leaf from her mother's hair. Sophie leaned against her father's arm with the easy weight of a child who has always known she is held. The lake moved quietly behind them, and the city hummed at a distance, and the light kept doing what September light does, making everything it touches look like something worth keeping. Some things, it turns out, don't require translation.